Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February 2nd Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. My name is Luke Mortensen. With me is Catherine Week, staff liaison to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We will work alongside the chair to facilitate tonight's proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, please mute yourself when not actively speaking. Please keep your video on for the duration of the meeting. If you are participating by phone, you can enter *6 to mute and unmute your phone. There will be no screen sharing of new materials tonight as a part of this meeting. All attachments, reference materials, and submissions from the public are included in the agenda packet. The chair will call for in-person and virtual comment for those who wish to speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, staff will call on each commissioner individually to provide their vote. Staff will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. At this point, I will turn it first over to Catherine for some further instructions.
Good evening, Commissioners. Catherine Week, staff liaison. So this evening, our chair, Barry Zielinski, has asked if the vice chair, Adam, can run the meeting because for continuity purposes, last meeting, we had some internet connectivity issues and, Barry is not comfortable interrupting the meeting. Adam has agreed, and as you all voted for chair and vice chair, that's one of his roles to fill in when the chair is unable, as long as there are no objections. And if there are no objections, we can continue with vice chair running the meeting. If you have comments or objections, we can hold a quick vote if necessary. So if there are no objections, we can kick it to the vice chair to open us up. So I see no objections. We'll go ahead and kick it to our vice chair, Adam Rankin, and he can get us going on the meeting.
All right, I guess first thing is can staff call roll to determine if there's quorum?
Yes, definitely is on Catherine Week. Hill?
Present.
Harrod?
Present.
Rankin?
Present.
Zielinski?
Yeah, I'm here.
Matthews?
Present.
Palos?
Present.
Okay, there is quorum this evening. Thank you.
All right, I guess the next order of business is seeing if there's any communication to come before the board.
Staff liaison Catherine Week. We have no additional communications that have come before the board. We believe everything we have received has been uploaded to your packet this evening.
All right, and is there any items that are going to be deferred?
We have no items this evening that will be deferred. And you might ask for the ex parte disclosure if there are any.
Oh, yeah. Is there any disclosure of ex parte communications for specific agenda items? I'll take that as no, and so then we can proceed with our loan agenda item, public hearing, considering a request for variance number B 2300004.
Yeah.
Could we have staff proceed with their presentation?
Yeah. Before we get into the item, there's one other question, is whether or not there are any abstentions. I don't think there are, but we should probably just ask that question before we move on.
Oh, extensions. So any extensions on like this agenda item? I'll take silence as no. All right, are we ready now for?
Yeah, we can have staff proceed. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, good evening, board members. Luke Mortensen, Planner of Planning Development Services Department. As Vice Chair Rankin has noted, public hearing item number 1 is a variance request from the off-street parking standards as found in Article 9 of the Land Development Code. The specific request is to increase the maximum distance an off-site parking area may be located from its associated building or use from 600 feet to 2,115 feet for a proposed sorority house redevelopment located at 1630 Oxford Road. I'll now briefly run through the 5 review criteria. I'll also note that this applicant previously submitted and withdrew a multi-part variance request for this property. Staff has received, and the board must consider this variance request completely new and independent of the previous variance request. Criteria 1 focuses on unique conditions based in plating or zoning. This variance originates from the applicant's desire to demolish an existing sorority house structure and replace with a new, larger sorority house structure at 1630 Oxford Road. The subject property is currently an unplatted parcel. However, it is midway through the major subdivision process. This is a 2-step process to plat and record the subject property as a proper lot of record. This applicant obtained variances from the right-of-way width standards at the January Planning Commission meeting. Unless there are any easements or rights-of-way proposed for dedication or vacation, the second step of the major subdivision will be the administrative review and approval of the final plat by Planning and Development Services staff. That process is underway at this time. The anticipated lot of record will be similarly shaped to adjacent sorority and fraternity house uses, especially the sorority house use directly abutting the subject property to the east. The subject property is zoned RMG district. That's our multi-dwelling residential Greek housing district. Very few land uses are permitted in the RMG district. Sorority house is a permitted use. The applicant has proposed an off-site accessory parking use that would be located on a vacant platted lot on Sigma New Place to be addressed as 1514 Sigma New Place. The proposed off-site parking area would satisfy a portion of the sorority house's off-street parking load. 1514 Sigma New Place should not be considered for conditions of uniqueness. Staff believes the applicant's major subdivision application will bring the subject property into compliance with the subdivision design standards as expressed by the Land Development Code and does not exhibit unique conditions based on its platting and zoning. Criteria 2 focuses on potential adverse effects upon the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. In staff's opinion, the requested variance would not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. Increasing the maximum distance between a principal use at 1630 Oxford Road and its accessory off-site parking area at 1514 Sigma New Place would not restrict adjacent properties from continued operation of their existing code-compliant land uses. Neighbor notice to property owners and neighborhood organizations within 400 feet was provided. Please note that some written communications were received, I believe today and yesterday, and I believe they both are in support. So please check at the bottom of the agenda packet for those. Criteria 3 focuses on unnecessary hardship as defined by our Land Development Code. Staff does not believe that requiring the applicant to comply with the off-site parking area distance standards constitutes an unnecessary hardship as defined by section 20-1701 of the code, which I've included in the staff report. Article 6 of the Land Development Code expresses occupancy limits by zoning district. The RMG district is special in that its occupancy limits are set by the intensity of the fraternity or sorority house use. The number of lawful live-in members is determined by how many code-compliant off-street parking spaces can be provided. This variance to increase the distance between the subject property at 1630 Oxford Road and a proposed off-site accessory parking area would allow the applicant to increase the subject property's occupancy since the 1514 Sigma New property could provide required off-street parking spaces. The Land Development Code standard of unnecessary hardship requires that the code's regulations deprive owners of their basic property rights or make it so that no code-compliant use can be established. Staff believes granting this variance would be a mechanism to increase the occupancy of the subject property rather than mitigate an unnecessary hardship as defined by our code or equalize the development rights of the subject properties owners against other properties in the same zone or district. Criteria 4 focuses on adverse effects on public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare. In staff's opinion, granting the proposed increase in distance between principal land use and accessory off-site parking area would not adversely affect the previously listed items. Granting this variance would allow the applicant to provide additional code-compliant off-street parking spaces that could remove vehicles from the Oxford Road right-of-way. This could support neighborhood safety and convenience. Additionally, the proposed route is located entirely on sidewalks within the public right-of-way. Portions of the route are lit by overhead city lighting. The proposed route would be the most safe, legal, and practical route from the subject property to the proposed off-site accessory parking area. And the fifth and final criteria focuses on the general spirit and intent of the code. Staff believes that the variance request to increase the distance between principal use and accessory off-site parking area satisfies the general spirit and intent of the code. The applicant would need an administratively approved major site plan for both the parking area and the proposed sorority house redevelopment. This includes full compliance with items like landscaping, lighting, surfacing, parking area setbacks, and parking space dimensional standards. An agreement between the applicant and the owner of 1514 Sigma New Place would be reviewed by the city attorney's office prior to recording at the Douglas County Register of Deeds. If access to the off-site parking area were ever removed, the applicant would need to revise the 1630 Oxford site plan and could no longer have as many lawful live-in members. Both major site plans, one for the subject property and one for 1514 Sigma New Place, would be administratively reviewed and approved by planning staff. Staff would not release site plan approvals or building permits until both site plans are compliant with the Land Development Code. Staff believes the review authority provided via the major site planning process ensures the specific intents of the RMG district, the off-street parking standards, and the variance process would be met. To conclude, staff does not believe the proposed variance request satisfies all 5 decision-making criteria as expressed by section 20-1309 of our code. Therefore, staff recommends denial of the variance, of the request for variance from section 20-906D1 to increase the maximum distance an off-site parking area may be located from its building or use from 600 feet to 2,115 feet for the property address of 1630 Oxford Road. As always, I'm available to stand for questions, and then our applicant and a number of members of this application are on the Zoom tonight as well.
All right, thanks. So I guess next we would move over to the applicant if they have any comments on the matter.
Yes.
One quick question. Yeah, just making sure you don't have any current questions for staff before we move to the next step. And you may not, so.
Catherine, Luke, we okay to proceed?
Yep.
All right.
Go ahead, Darren.
Thank you. Well, initially, good evening, Chair and BZA Commissioners. My name is Darren Ammon. I'm a landscape architect with Bartlett and West, and I've been helping the Tri-Delta members and the various different owners on the team here, and some of which are going to speak along with their design plans and this BZA variance request. Initially, I want to just say thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight, but we are at a very critical point. Thanks to Luke and Catherine and Jeff Crick and all of the planners that I work with and have for the past 20 years. They have a tough job in what they're doing. And I understand that, you know, it's their job to apply code compliance and look at these 5 different factors. But in this particular instance, I respectfully disagree with the recommendation of denial that this isn't a hardship and this isn't a unique situation where this variance is needed. Luke, if it's okay, would you be able to put the timeline up on the screen while I walk through some of this? I'm going to take a few moments here before others on our team are going to speak as well, and Luke will be pulling up the timeline that's been included in your packet. But I think it's really important here for us to tell a little bit of the story of how we got to this point and why we're requesting this very unique and specific variance. Because I want to point out that this wasn't done in a vacuum. We didn't just submit this variance at the beginning of the month, last month, and here we sit 30 days later, and we didn't try our hardest to get to where we are today. So I think telling this story a little bit will help you understand how we got to this point and why we're requesting this in this very unique situation. Initially, you can see on the timeline that's in front of you is that this started almost 6 months ago. There was an initial pre-application meeting with city staff that brought to their attention what the Tri-Delta wished to do on their existing property. Keep in mind their existing property has been in this location and site plan for decades. It is 0.92 acres in size, which is less than 1 acre, of course, but in today's standards, to try to do some of the things you need to do when you redevelop would take a larger piece of property, but they're surrounded in an existing neighborhood and development, and this is the property that they're within and are looking to redevelop, excuse me. After the initial pre-application meeting, which was done by the owners, they engaged myself and our team to help them get through the City of Lawrence process. And we have various things. This BZA variance request is only one step of many, as Luke had mentioned as well, that we're going through. When we got engaged with the design team, we came up with the very first concept that we looked at to try to help them with their site. And that was really understanding how we could maximize some of the parking, get the house on there, and take all of those things into account. We had a neighborhood meeting on October 12th of last year. There was approximately 12 members that attended that meeting. We got lots of different feedback and heard the concerns from the neighborhood. Because one of the things I brought to the attention of the ownership was we need to meet with the neighbors and understand their concerns right away up front, so that we can find a harmonious solution to what they want to do on the property, and that would work within the neighborhood for the long term. Once we put this concept together, we had a second pre-application meeting with the staff and heard some additional feedback. And we did hear from the neighbors when we presented the initial site plan that we put together that parking in the area was a concern. This first site plan tried to achieve getting as much parking on the property as possible, along with the house and all the other elements. The only downside to that is it came with some challenges from us. Is there was setback challenges where we were pushing things right to the property line. We were not meeting buffer yards. Landscape codes were not met, and we were asking for a reduction from the overall parking count. After these additional discussions, in order to meet timelines, we did submit, as Luke mentioned, a previous BZA application, and that initial site plan had 15 different variances. It was because of all the different things we weren't meeting. We had more parking spaces on the property, but after subsequent conversations again with city staff, getting lots of different feedback from the neighbors on this particular plans, it was found real easy that this was not going to be supported. It was not supported by staff. The neighbors did not like the setbacks being so close and all of the other items that we tried to accommodate on the site, and it just wasn't going to work. So we wanted to find something again that was in alignment with what we wanted to do, and with try to get the codes in alignment with the vision of the property and the neighborhood. Ultimately, we deferred and then withdrew the application and went back to the drawing board. During the month of December, you can see there's some bullet points that I had noted on there a little bit. And I think it's important to point out that there was a significant amount of time and effort by our team working with city staff. There was conversations with myself and the planning director, Jeff Crick, along with Lucas and Catherine and others, in trying to come up with a concept then that we could feel we could move down the path of finding something that was supportable. We also got additional feedback from the neighbors. Paula Martin, the president of the West Hills Neighborhood Association, and others I was in contact with almost daily for a while, getting email or verbal conversations. So keeping the lines of communication open as we move down the path. As we ownership, as we got to this second concept that was developed, and it felt like we were closer. There were still a few variances we were looking at we potentially would have to go after. But one of the ideas that came up is the ownership had talked to the adjacent Delta Upsilon fraternity, which is just 200 feet to the north of the current Tri-Delta property. And they were amenable to having 25 of their parking spaces go that we could lease and count toward our parking count to meet the code. We started down that path, but subsequently the DU fraternity decided that they could not part with those stalls. And then we were somewhat back to the drawing board again because we were trying to meet the parking count of getting this to move forward. The ownership had other conversations with others in the area and finally was able to get a conversation started with the Sigma Nu fraternity, which owns the parking lot location for the accessory parking lot that we're showing that's in your packet today. And this, I would like to point out, is really the closest possible land in this area to even do greenfield development at this time. Because as you know, this is a long established neighborhood. There are not greenfield sites to do anything. And this property in and of itself is not ideal to build on. There's significant slope, there's trees. It's going to be costly for them to do that, but they were able to work on an agreement with the Sigma News to be able to put a future 80 to 85 stall parking lot at this location. When we had this in place, we revamped our concept slightly more to its current state. That's within your packet right now. And that was submitted as a revised site plan back through the site plan process. The ownership had additional discussions with Sigma Nu and has agreed to build a future parking lot in this parcel at this time. And then we submitted the current variance that we're asking to be approved that's in front of you tonight, which is one variance. What's a little bit unique here is we're asking for a variance that actually doesn't have anything to do with the property itself, because right now, with all the revisions we've made over the past multiple months, it's not approved yet, but we are code compliant with everything on the property. It's just the distance, because of the way it has to be looked upon, is what we're requesting for tonight. So we had another neighborhood meeting with this concept in place with the accessory parking lot. Again, everything that's in the packet. The neighbors were very appreciative of getting everything into code compliance. We don't have setback issues. We're meeting the landscape code, the buffer yards, and getting as much parking on the property as we can. You will probably hear from some of those neighbors tonight. And you will note that I think it's a pretty big step that we have support from the West Hills Neighborhood Association via the letter that's been provided and does request and agree to the granting of the variance that's in front of you tonight. So on the last couple items, and then we can probably take this down, is we did have a planning commission meeting already for the plat. Lucas mentioned that briefly, and that was approved unanimously for those items, and then the site plan was resubmitted. But in closing, before others on the team will speak about a few different things, I'd like to just point out a few key points as to why I believe this variance is really critical to being approved for our team to move forward. Throughout this presentation, and I wanted to walk you through this timeline, I've explained we've vetted numerous concepts, revisions, and options. We've been transparent through the process with the West Hills Neighborhood Association. I think the letter of support from them and others speaks to volumes to what I believe the process in Lawrence should look like when you're working with the neighborhood, coming to an agreement, finding support for something, for a common goal that you can work with the neighborhood and show them that you can get done. We started with 15 variances and now we're down to one. And again, as I mentioned, it's not even actually on the property. It's because of the distance that we have to be to look at in order to get from A to B. Within the distance criteria, we're talking about college students. These are folks that are used to walking great distances every day and do currently just to get to campus from where they're located in the Greek housing. One thing that's a little bit unique to think about is while we have to show the right-of-way path, that's the 2,100 feet we're asking for. If you go as the crow flies and quite honestly cutting through the existing fraternity and sorority properties from where Tri-Delta is to this property for the new accessory parking lot, it is private. There's no easements. They do that today. It's less than 1,000 feet. And I'll guarantee you that's where most of the students are going to walk because they do it today or drive down High Drive to get there. There's no floating easements in the world. There's no police out there identifying that you cannot go there. It will be the path of least resistance, and they will take that path to get there. Lastly, in that regard to the distance, there has been discussion already amongst the Tri-Deltas about ride sharing to get over for the girls that would park over there, and the house mom giving additional rides if things like that need to happen, while still, 60 to 70% of the parking is already adjacent and on the site that we're developing. Last couple things, it was noted in Lucas's presentation that staff does agree that this variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, morals, convenience, or prosperity of the general welfare of the public. Again, it speaks that this really is an approvable variance that we're asking for, and we really need to move forward. I'm not going to regurgitate everything in Ms. Martin's letter from the West Hills Neighborhood Association, but our team and myself, I totally agree with all the points she brought up in there. They, again, speak to why we believe this is an approvable variance. I guess the last couple items is, while with any site plan or any other variance or anything you look at to approve within the city of Lawrence, understanding costs and financial impacts cannot be weighed. I don't think that's something that should be forgotten in this particular instance either, is that it's not going to be cheap for the Tri-Deltas to develop this additional parking lot. It is a severely sloped, treed lot that's going to take quite a bit of effort and cost to make this happen so they can succeed in their goal of having a new house at their existing location, but also benefiting the neighborhood. So that's something they didn't plan on when they looked at having a house upgrade here at the University of Kansas. So that is a substantial cost that they're taking on to make this happen, but they understand they need to do this to move forward. So from the city of Lawrence standpoint, this infill development, rebuilding on a site that already exists, is something that's encouraged within the community as part of the strategic plans and goals. They have no option to buy a greenfield site anywhere near here to do anything like this, so they're stuck with what they have. But it is supported and having infill redevelopment as a part of the city's overall goals. So is this a hardship with some of these items we're talking about and what we're facing here to get to the end? I believe it is. Is this a unique situation? I certainly believe it is. It's not something I've even encountered in my career doing things like this with this situation. But again, with that, I'm going to stop talking and thank all of you BZA commissioners for your time and service to our community. I do hope that you understand what we're asking for here today and will grant us this variance to move forward with this project for the local Tri-Delta girls that will be living in this house. So I guess before we answer any other specific questions, I'll ask if there's others on the team that would like to speak for a couple of different points.
Hey, Darren, this is Matt. I'd like to say a few things, if that's possible. My name is Matt Spearing. I'm the project manager for Tri-Delta. My company's name is the Kalos Group, and I've worked closely with the ownership team and Darren and the architecture team on this project. As Darren mentioned, he's laid it out, the efforts that we've gone through to get to this point today. We have worked closely with the neighborhood and city staff in order to reduce the amount of variances from 15 down to 1. this, as mentioned in previously, this neighborhood is not only residential, but it's also has other Greek organizations and houses within the West Hills neighborhood. As Darren mentioned, our property is less than an acre. And so in order to provide the number of parking spaces for a chapter of 220 members is virtually almost impossible to be able to build an appropriate structure for this organization. So we have gone to great effort in order to provide the best scenario for our client, but then also the neighborhood and the other Greek organizations as well, because hopefully we can be able to lease some additional spots to these organizations and get parking off the street as well. But thank you for allowing us to come speak with you today and kind of lay out our situation. And we're happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do any board members have any questions for the applicant? All right, I'll take silence as no. Is there anybody from public, either on Zoom?
Staff Liaison Catherine Week, we do have someone in the audience who would like to speak, and I'm not sure if there's anyone online. Luke can check for that as well.
I'm Chris Nichols with Marland Construction, and we would be supportive of this project. The city's site development standards need to be modified for certain circumstances that are beyond control. I believe this project fits into that situation. This project's also vital to the Tri-Delt sorority and their needs, as well as it's vital to the University of Kansas. This plan and project doesn't adversely affect the neighborhood, as we've heard, and I believe its current requirements associated with the project meet the needs.
This is Paula Martin. Is this an appropriate time to speak?
Go ahead, Paula.
I'm the president of the association, and I've lived in West Hills for 36 years. The Tri-Delts are members of our association. We value them, but we are adamantly opposed to the first plan with the 15 variances. But we support their current efforts. They're an important part of our neighborhood. I said most everything in my letter, but I want to add the good faith that has been shown in securing this ancillary parking. I can imagine projects where the distance between the property and the parking could be significant, but in this situation, I think it's not. I think this is a very unique situation in the Greek community, and many of these sorority and fraternity members walk this path every day. West Hills encourages you to approve this variance. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your service.
Vice Chair Rankin, I'm not seeing any other Zoom commenters, and we don't have anybody else in the room.
All right, thank you. And I guess with that, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
Vice Chair, this is Catherine Week, Staff Liaison. You will need to take a vote to close the public comment at this time. Yeah.
All right. So do we call roll to close public vote?
You'll take a motion in a second first. Yeah.
This is Barry Shalinsky. I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing part of this item.
This is Tressa Hill. I'll second that.
This is Staff Liaison Catherine Week. I can go ahead and call roll to take that vote. Hill,
Yeah.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
and Palos.
Aye.
And it is now back to the board.
This is Dean. I have a question for staff. And just, is there some science about 600 feet, where that came from, or is that just a standard that is applied by most cities?
This has been in that 600 foot has been in the code since around 2006. So I personally am not sure how that number was selected. I did want to make a point that while some specifically multifamily apartments or developments in town have shuttle services, to my knowledge, those are shuttle services that would have be provided anyway to a place like campus. They're really not shuttling between accessory parking and principal uses. This is one of the more unique instances and use of this code section that we've seen.
Okay, thank you.
So do I understand correctly? It's 1 and 3. It's the uniqueness, for example, the city agrees with 2, 4, and 5. So how is this project, how is this property unique?
Do you want me to answer that? Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Yes, that's correct. In the staff report, staff found that only 1 and 3 were not met. So if you wanted to focus your discussion points on those two and agree with staff and the other criteria points, then you could certainly focus your discussion in those 2 criteria.
I did look at the maps for city maps and also Douglas County maps. And this is not the only Greek sorority fraternity house that's on a lot of, let's say 40,000 or less that borders on RS5. There were, the systems kept failing, the city in particular, the map system kept failing on me, but I did find at least 3 others around, 1 near this particular house, 2 over by the chancellor, all that were, 2 that were only 20-some thousand square feet. And I think the other one was like 35,000 square feet. So the size and proximity to single family housing zoning was not unique.
Just to be clear, the 85 spaces are specifically for the sorority. They're not being shared with Sigma Nu. Did I understand that correctly?
I'll let Darren jump in after, but a portion of the accessory parking areas spots would satisfy Tri-Delta's off-street parking use. And if they chose to enter into agreements with other fraternity and sorority house users, that would be an agreement beyond our purview.
Okay, thank you.
Darren Ammon, Bartlett and West. I guess I'd just add, Lucas, I think answered your question, but yeah, the difference in stalls that we need to make up is 32. So there'd be at least 32 that would be used for the tri-deltas. But they've agreed to build an 80-85 stall parking lot that would and could be used by others. And that would help the parking in the entire area, not just for the tri-deltas, but for others as well. Correct.
One of the other, forgive me because I was copying and pasting to a Word document, so I'm not sure what section this is from. But the paragraph is, excuse me, regarding a legal binding agreement for the use of the parking. I assume that's beyond our purview.
Yeah, those agreements would be not just with off-site parking agreements, but with shared parking. Those agreements are more common. They are reviewed by the city attorney, and then they get recorded at the Register of Deeds with both properties.
Okay. Just making sure I was clear. Thank you.
This is Darren Ammon, Bartlett and West. Luke, if I could, I don't know, can I actually add or maybe try to answer a little bit of the comment about the uniqueness of the property that was brought up?
Darren, they can ask, the board can bring it back to the applicant if they have additional questions, yes. But
okay,
we'll wait till the chair does that, yeah.
Fair. Thank you.
This is Dean. I'd like to hear what Darren had to say, if the other board members are okay with it.
Is that okay, Catherine?
Yeah, it might be appropriate for the vice chair to weigh in on that instead of staff, but yes.
I'm fine with Darren speaking on the uniqueness.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. I guess I just wanted to add, since what I do every day is site planning and work with all different types of properties, sizes, configurations, and challenges. And the only reason I was going to bring that up is what makes this unique is not that, you know, this is a square property. It's 0.92 acres, and that's the size that it is. But what's unique and what makes this a hardship is that you think about the time when this house was originally developed, 40 years ago, roughly, and the codes that we have today and how those are applicable to the size of a lot that you need to make a successful plan meet today's codes is way different than it was 40 years ago. There was no such thing as 25-yard buffer yards, all of the landscape amenities you need, the size of vehicles and the parking requirements based on occupants. Even setbacks have increased significantly. So I guess my point is we try to work within the constraints of the code that were provided. And when your lot is the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago, it does make it a significant challenge for owners and developers and others, whether it's a greenfield or a redevelopment as this such is as infill, to be successful and harmoniously marry all these things together. And I guess why we're asking for this variance so that they can redevelop within this neighborhood and continue what they're doing today by providing a safe and quality living environment that meets the codes on the property, can provide this additional parking, and they can move forward to have a nice house for these girls in a year and a half when it would be done. Without the granting of this variance, I'll be blunt and say I'm not sure how this moves forward. Because we have vetted this in so many different ways that's why we're asking for this to be granted, this one variance, the distance, and then we can move on to the next step. So anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you. Bringing it back to the board, is there any other discussion on any of the points, either piggybacking on what staff has found, or, see if there's more to it that, the staff may not have saw initially? All right, so is the board, someone ready to make a motion? Do we all know what we want to do, or?
This is Dean again, and I'm not ready to make a motion, but I am impressed by the issue of uniqueness that, what seems to have changed here is the regulations have changed. I don't know if that's unique. That's something that's a common occurrence, but it seems that it's put them in an awkward position of wanting to comply. I'm impressed by the support from the neighborhood association that all these years that they've been there, that they seem to get along very well, or get along at least. And as far as hardship, if they don't get this, they can't go forward. And again, I understand that this is something that they're wanting to do, that they brought this upon themselves somewhat, but that's, that's progress, and what they're trying to do and what they've succeeded in doing and getting over an obstacle that is basically a dimensional issue of 600 feet versus 2,100 feet, I think is admirable. So I think they've gone to great efforts to address the intent of the regulations. So I will say this, I'm in support of the request for variance.
This is Tressa. I just don't get the uniqueness. I mean, I see this in many of the projects that not just come before the board, but, that are worked on in the city. It does take time there, and things do change over time. I just don't, it doesn't catch. Those seem like arguments that everything that comes before the board, that each one of the projects could use. So I'm searching maybe incorrectly for something that makes the property unique.
Tressa, I sort of struggle with that also. I also am very impressed that this development team has put a lot of effort into working with neighbors to try to figure out a way to address a situation to everyone's satisfaction. We see a lot of parking variance applications where this degree of engagement has not happened. And that certainly is something that I take seriously.
Are we ready to make a motion, or does somebody else need to say, have anything to say? We're very quiet tonight, so.
I'll chime in. Without saying more, I spent a lot of time in this area when I was a younger person here in Lawrence. And I've also spent time in this area here in my later years as well. It's been my experience throughout that quite a bit of off-street parking going on Oxford Road, Sunset Drive, and Cambridge. And so I am really, really impressed that I don't see emails and letters from surrounding neighbors in our packet. I'm really impressed the neighborhood association has signed off on this, but it somewhat defies my experience of this area, where right now, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of off-street parking to be found during certain hours of the day on Cambridge, Sunset, or Oxford. And we're talking about adding 30 new bodies here to the Trident house. And the other houses, I imagine, will remain occupied as they are at these current levels. I do think that Darren's right. I think that the women are going to cut straight through High Drive. There's no reason they wouldn't, you know. I mean, that's probably actually the safest path for them. So I don't think they have to walk 2,100 feet to get to their parking. That defies my experience as well. But I wonder about 20, 21, 22-year-old woman wanting to walk from this lot down here to the north, I'd say up here to the north, over 1,000 feet back to their sorority house. I just see them doing what they're already doing, is they want to park on Oxford, Sunset, or Cambridge somewhere. And maybe somebody's going to end up having to park over on Signally Place. But I really struggle with the idea that we're not going to see the parking on those residential streets in this area not get really slammed. I mean, I can tell you, my daughters used to play soccer down here at the park at Sunset and Stratford, and even then the parking was coming all the way down Sunset to Stratford Road. That's how overflowed it was. And we're talking about adding 30 new bodies to the Tridale house. I'm struggling getting my head around that. And in particular, then that means that's going to impact what condition 4 and condition 5, I think, at least, of the conditions that we're supposed to analyze. So that's my thoughts.
I am not someone who has spent a lot of time down in that area. What is the lighting? I'm just curious. If there's all these young women, you know, in that area crossing, especially at night, it doesn't affect my decision necessarily, but I think it's something certainly to be mindful of as we think about the amount, just the, you know, the distance they may have to walk. I know most women are pretty good at buddy system, but that's not always realistic. So I was just curious.
Most of the lighting is around High Drive and Emery Road. It's not the city, or it's not the Municipal Services and Operations Department's policy to light all local roads. So that's why it's not uncommon to have unlit local roads.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering.
My experience years ago was the lighting wasn't terrible on High Drive then. It's probably better now. Wouldn't be my biggest concern.
No, it's not mine. I mean, it is mine only because I'm, you know, the position I hold in the world, but it's just something I think just to be, even just for the folks here who are contracting, is just something to be mindful of. But yes, I agree.
Well, with regard to that issue, I think it's pretty clear that the most likely path of travel is going to be the 1,000-foot path, not the 2,000-foot path. And my understanding is that that's basically all on private property. So I'm not even sure who would control that lighting. But I agree that it's certainly something to be mindful of. Unfortunately, in the world as it is in which we live in it.
Well, given the amount of silence, I would suggest to the chair inviting, well, she's Paula Martin to you, she's Judge Martin to me. But I'd invite, if the commission would allow it, I'd invite more comments from the neighborhood association president.
Yeah, that sounds fun by me. If she has more comment, I'm willing to hear it.
Is that allowed?
Judge Martin, you're free to go.
All right. I do think it's a unique property. I hadn't looked at it as had Ms. Hill. I was just relying on my many years in Lawrence, and I couldn't think of similar properties. But on Oxford Road, this house is boxed in by single family homes. And I think it's it's different than many situations where you're asking for that big of a variance in the feet from the main property. One, because there is another way that's 1,000 feet, not the 2,100 feet. But two, there are so many sororities and fraternities that front Emory Road with their back with the Sigma Nu place. That those kids are walking all the time, and those are both men and women. And there is lighting in their parking lots, which are to the, get my directions straight, to the west. So as you come around High Drive and you're going up towards Sigma Nu, you have their houses on the right, you have their parking lots on the left. And it's my recollection that the parking lots are lit. I haven't gone over at night to look. I've walked in the area at night, but I guess I've never paid particular attention to it as I walked my dog because I didn't seem concerned about my safety in that area. I've been really impressed with what they've done as far as neighborhood engagement. And as I said earlier, we were adamantly opposed to their first one. They came back to the drawing board. They worked with us. We want these girls to have a nice house. We want them to be able to expand their membership. They have been a vital part of our neighborhood for decades. And if it's possible, well, the other thing is this not only provides the 30-some spaces that they need to accommodate their hope for increased membership, it provides 50 more for the other houses that are in that area. And I think that will significantly reduce the parking along Oxford, Sunset, and Cambridge. So I see it as a benefit to the neighborhood in terms of off-street parking. Although, you know, our kids commuting to campus from everywhere. So, you know, maybe those kids then just fill up those places. But I see it as a real benefit to the neighborhood. And we really do want to accommodate the tri-delts. And we're fully in support of the plan that has been put forth. And I think the ancillary parking addresses not only the concerns for tri-delt parking, but concerns for parking in general in the neighborhood. And I really hope you'll approve this. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Vice Chair Rankin, I would just add, because we've been talking about the High Drive route, the shorter route, we're not able to, staff was not able to analyze or consider that route. The code requires that it be a safe, legal, and practical route. And so unless, you know, a suite of easements or agreements were presented to us, we weren't able to analyze that route. And so that's why we had to go the right-of-way option. And had you know, easements been obtained and presented, we could have looked at that, but they weren't.
This is Staff Liaison Catherine Week. I might just add that that's not to say that in reality, that is not the route that would be taken. It's just to say that staff from the city's perspective can't analyze something that's under other ownership other than the applicant at this point, which is why the high drive was not analyzed by staff. So.
Okay, thanks. That's good to know. I guess bringing it back to the board, do we have any more discussion, any more questions, any more holdups, or?
I'll follow up with what I said, which is I'm struggling with 4 and 5, but at the same time, I have the neighborhood association here and a total lack of negative comments in my packet from the neighborhood. So kudos to the development team. And I would simply say, I remember years ago, I read something once about how large bodies of water moderate temperature, you know, and so that's why you don't see a lot of snow, maybe next to, you know, some place in Oregon or Washington or something like that. And so I was convinced that, well, that would also be true for things bordering Lake Michigan or Lake Superior, right? So you can imagine the first time I went to Chicago and experienced lake effect snow. Well, this isn't supposed to happen, but it's because I didn't know what I was talking about.
Vice Chairman, with your permission, could I add something? But I won't speak unless given permission to do so.
I guess, does the board want to hear? See, saw thumbs up. I think that's it. So, sure, yeah, go for it.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. I guess just want to say that I know this is a tough decision, and I guess, in my opinion, just seeing how unique of even the decision may need to be illustrates what we're dealing with here. 100% appreciate Miss Martin and her comments, and Mr. Herod, yours as well, because what you stated is exactly what we've tried to accomplish here, was having an open line of communication with those most directly impacted besides those that are living in the house, which is the neighborhood. And as I've already mentioned, I really feel like we have exhausted every option to try to come to a solution to help this project see a successful end. And this is it. This is unique, and the number is what the number is for the distance, because we're following the rules that we're given to play with from the code going along the public right of way. I will say just briefly in terms of the lighting comment and those cutting down High Drive, there's been a couple of new fraternities that were built along there in the lower area adjacent to the homes. There's been more lighting, and I developed trails for communities and in Lawrence all over. And the good thing that you want to see is activity and lighting. You don't want to have you don't want people walking down a dark trail. An area that's active, feels safe and comfortable for people to walk in, and that's that area, because there are people walking around. It's well lit. It's better than it was. So that area is safe too. Again, sidebar, it's not what we're really looking at here with the public right of way situation, but just making that as an additional comment. So anyway, I appreciate everybody's time. I know this is a tough decision. Hope we can get the approval to move forward, and I'd be glad to answer any additional questions that we still have not presented or answered. So thank you, everyone.
I have a question, real quick, simple question from anybody. So to make sure I'm reading this right, which of the five conditions is staff agreeing are met?
Staff is agreeing that 2, 4, and 5 are met.
Okay, so staff believes 2, 4, and 5 are met. So those
Correct.
4 and 5 were the ones I was having trouble with. So, okay, thank you.
This is Dean. I'm ready to make a motion for approval.
So Dean, is that you making the motion or just stating that you're ready to make a motion?
I am stating, you're correct. I'm stating I'm making the motion to approve.
All right. We have a motion to approve the variance, right?
Yes.
To approve the variance, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, staff, can you call roll?
Yes, staff liaison Catherine Week. Hill,
Against.
Herod. I'm sorry, we didn't hear that. Can you repeat your? Hi. Rankin,
Nay.
Shalinsky,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
and Palos.
Yes.
So the motion does carry 4-2.
Thank you, everyone, including you, staff. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, Steph. Now I guess we move on. Is there any miscellaneous business for the board?
This is Staff Liaison Catherine Week. We do not have any miscellaneous items. I usually take this time to let you know if we have anything on the horizon. We do have one item that will be on your next BZA meeting. So we will be having a regular meeting next month.
All right, thanks. And with no other thing, no other items, do I have a motion?
I'd like to just quickly say thank you, Adam, for stepping in and running the meeting tonight.
I don't know if I'd call it running. I'm stumbling every step of the way. So thanks to staff for holding my hand.
Okay. And with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All right. Yep. Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Hill,
I agree.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
Matthews,
Aye.
Palos.
Aye.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.